Every human life, they say, begins with a single spark. But Dr. Alina Vance knew the truth was infinitely more complex. It began with a trillion of them, a silent, shimmering storm of potential firing in the fragile universe of a toddler's brain. And on this crisp Tuesday morning, in the unassuming theater of Meadowbrook Park, two futures were being built in real time, synapse by synapse, in ways no one else seemed to see. In the sun-dappled sandbox, 2-year-old Martin was conducting an orchestra only he could hear. His instrument, a set of chunky, primary-colored blocks. His symphony, a wobbling, precarious tower that had already collapsed 3 times. His small tongue poked from the corner of his mouth as he placed the red block on the blue, his entire world narrowed to this single, monumental task. A faint, encouraging hum came from his father, Ben, who sat on the bench nearby, his gaze soft and present. He didn't intervene, didn't correct the tilt. He simply bore witness. Each time the tower fell, Martin's face would crumple for a second, a micro-expression of frustration, before his eyes would refocus, his little hands darting out to begin again. Click whir buzz. In Alina's mind, she could almost hear the sound of his neural landscape, new pathways forging like pioneer roads through a wild forest, building resilience, problem-solving, and a deep, intrinsic belief that effort mattered. 20 feet away, in the shade of the old oak, sat Juliet.
She was also 2.
Dressed in a lace-trimmed pink dress, she was strapped securely into a gleaming stroller that cost more than Alina's first car. Juliet's mother, elegantly dressed and perfectly composed, scrolled through her phone with one hand, absently rocking the stroller with the other. Juliet's world was not the texture of sand or the weight of a block. It was the flat, hypnotic glow of a cartoon on a tablet propped before her. Bright shapes flitted and sang, demanding nothing, offering everything. Juliet's eyes were wide, but unmoving. Her body was still. No frustration, no effort, no triumph. Just passive consumption. Fizzled pause static. Alina's mental soundscape for Juliet was dimmer, a lush, pre-wired garden where the most exciting paths were already paved, bypassing the need to build her own. Alina, sipping her too-strong park vendor coffee, wasn't here to judge. She was here to observe the most critical, yet most invisible, construction project on Earth, the building of a human mind. Her research at the university's Child Development Lab had the scans to prove it, the brains of children engaged in responsive, sensory-rich, struggle-filled play lit up like galaxies being born. The neural activity of children in prolonged states of passive screen consumption showed a different pattern, efficient in some narrow ways, but eerily quiet in the prefrontal cortex, the future home of executive function, creativity, and emotional regulation. The chasm between Martin and Juliet at this moment wasn't about love. Both were clearly adored. It wasn't about wealth or intention. It was about architecture. Martin's parents were his co-architects, providing the safe site and raw materials, then standing back to let him swing the hammer, learning the feel of the weight, the consequence of a misstrike. Juliet's world, however loving, was being prefabricated for her. She was living in a beautifully appointed, already built house, never handed a tool, never shown the blueprint. As if on cue, a sparrow landed near Martin's sandcastle. He froze, his block suspended in midair. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, tracked the bird's jerky hops. "Burr," he whispered, turning to his father. Not a statement, but a question, a hypothesis offered to the world. "A sparrow," Ben affirmed, leaning forward. "Look at his little beak. What do you think he's looking for?" Martin dropped the block, his tower forgotten, now consumed by a new mystery. Click whir buzz. The curiosity pathway just got a major upgrade. At the same moment, Juliet's cartoon ended, auto-playing into another with a jarringly different theme song. She blinked, a faint frown appearing. She made a small, uncertain sound. Her mother, without looking up from a text thread, reached over and tapped the screen, restarting the favored show. The frown smoothed away. The stillness returned. Fizzle static. Alina's heart gave a familiar, scientific pang. This was the quiet fork in the road. This was where catch them young ceased to be a cliché and became a biological imperative. It wasn't about flashcards or forced lessons before nap time. It was about this, the choice between the messy, unpredictable, living world of a sparrow and the frictionless, looping, digital world of a cartoon. It was about nurturing the builder or catering to the tenant. One child was being given the tools to build his own mind. The other was being given a pre-furnished room in hers. And the blueprint for a lifetime of curiosity or passivity, of grit or frustration, of navigating the unknown or seeking the familiar, was being drafted right now, in the sand and the shadows, one synaptic firework at a time. The real question, Alina thought, finishing her bitter coffee, was not which child was smarter. The question was, whose brain was being prepared for a world no one could yet imagine? The storm of potential was raging in both of them, but only one was being taught to dance in the rain. Every parent dreads the sound, the gasp, the clatter, the sudden, wet silence before the storm. For most, a spilled cup is a crisis, a mess to be mopped, a frustration to be soothed, a minute lost in an already overflowing day. But in the high-stakes laboratory of toddlerhood, a spilled drink isn't an accident. It's an overture. 3 weeks after the day in the park, in a sunlit kitchen that smelled of toast and possibilities, Martin reached for his sippy cup of apple juice. His coordination, still a work in progress, betrayed him. The cup tipped. A cascade of golden liquid arced through the air, painting the oak tabletop, dripping onto the tile floor with a rhythmic plink plink plink. Martin froze, his little face a canvas of shock. His eyes, wide as moons, darted from the expanding puddle to his father, Ben, who was loading the dishwasher. This was the precipice. Here, in the next 3 seconds, a neural pathway would be carved, one of shame or of science, of fear or of fascinated discovery. Ben turned. He saw the juice. He saw his son's terrified anticipation of reprimand. And then he did something extraordinary. He didn't sigh. He didn't say, oops. He gasped with genuine theatrical flair. Whoa! Ben boomed, dropping to his knees beside the table, eye level with the disaster. Martin, look what you made. Martin flinched. A river. Ben declared, his finger tracing the juice's path across the table. A sticky, shiny, apple juice river. Where is it going? The fear in Martin's eyes melted, replaced by confusion, then a flicker of interest. He peered at the puddle. River.
Yes.
A river. And look, Ben pointed to where a droplet was clinging to the table's edge, defying gravity. That's a waterfall. A tiny, brave waterfall.
Can you see it?
Martin leaned in, his nose inches from the droplet. Fa-fall, he breathed, the word a revelation. What followed wasn't cleanup. It was an expedition. Ben fetched a handful of dry oatmeal from the pantry. Let's see what happens when our boat goes down the river, he said, placing an oat flake at the top of the sticky streak. Together, they blew gently, navigating their boat through the golden currents. They used a napkin to dam the flow, creating a lake. They discussed whether the juice was more like a snake or a road. The words came in a rush. Sticky, shiny, flow, boat, lake, slow, fast drip. 20 minutes later, the juice was wiped up, but Martin's brain was lit up. Ben hadn't just avoided a tantrum. He had conducted a masterclass in fluid dynamics, vocabulary, problem-solving, and narrative building. He had taken a moment of perceived failure and woven it into a world. The spilled juice became a story they now shared, a foundational myth of their tiny tribe. Click were buzz. The language centers in Martin's temporal lobe weren't just learning words. They were learning that the entire physical world was a text to be read, a story waiting to be told. Across town, in a pristine, minimalist living room where white carpets whispered of danger, a similar drama unfolded with Juliet. Her juice box, pierced by a neon straw, sat on a laminated placemat. When her small hand knocked it over, the reaction was instantaneous, efficient, and utterly different. Oh, Juliet. No, no, no. Her mother, Celeste, was up in a flash, a dish towel magically in hand. Look at the mess. I told you to be careful. Her voice was a tight blend of annoyance and worry for the endangered carpet. Juliet's lower lip trembled. The message was internalized immediately. I made a bad thing. I was not careful. I am a problem to be solved. It's okay, just don't move, Celeste instructed, swooping in to contain the damage. Within 30 seconds, the evidence was gone. The crisis was averted. Order was restored. But something else was restored, too. Silence. No new words were introduced, except mess and careful. No curiosity was sparked. The event had no narrative, only a moral. Be neat. Don't fail. The juice was not a river. It was an error. Juliet learned to associate exploration with reprimand and her own motor skills with the creation of messes. Her brain processed it differently. Instead of the rich, interconnected firing of sensory, linguistic, and emotional centers, the dominant signal was a simple, sharp ping from the amygdala. Alert. Disapproval detected.
'Cause you.
The complex symphony of learning was reduced to a single, fearful note. Dr. Alina Vance, reviewing parent logs from her study that evening, could see the divergence in the data as clearly as if it were on a graph. The children of parents who practiced responsive elaboration, the Bens of the world, were adding an average of 40% more unique words to their expressive vocabulary per week. But it wasn't just the word count. It was the kind of words, verbs of action, nouns of nature, adjectives of texture and emotion. They were building a language for experience. The others, the children of efficient correction, had flatter linguistic profiles. Their words were often commands, labels, or prohibitions. They were building a language for compliance. The hook of the story wasn't in the grand gestures, Alina realized. It was in the microfractures of the day. You didn't build a curious mind with expensive toys. You built it by turning a spilled drink into a geography lesson. You didn't build an anxious mind by being cruel. You built it by valuing the perfection of a carpet over the imperfection of a child's experiment. Martin would go to bed that night perhaps remembering the brave oatmeal boat. Juliet would likely just remember the sharp tone, the scary word mess, and the rule about being careful. 2 spills. 2 cleanups. 2 entirely different blueprints for engaging with a world that is, by its very nature, gloriously, chaotically spillable. We misunderstand the tantrum. We call it the terrible twos, painting it as a behavioral flaw, a storm to be weathered or silenced. But beneath the scarlet face, the clenched fists, the ear-splitting wail that echoes off the supermarket fluorescent lights, something far more critical is occurring. This isn't a malfunction. It's a system overload, and how we respond doesn't just quiet the noise. It writes the code for a lifetime of emotional navigation. For Juliet, the monsoon hit in the baking aisle, between the flour and the frosting. It was a simple no. 1 word. Her mother, Celeste, had said it crisply, finally looking up from her phone, when Juliet pointed a tiny, imperious finger at a box of rainbow-sprinkled cupcakes. Not today, sweetheart. But for Juliet, it wasn't simple. It was the collapse of a universe she had already constructed in her mind, the sweet, crumbly taste, the triumph of holding the box, the happy sugar rush. The denial wasn't a disappointment. It was a cataclysm, a wave of pure, undiluted feeling, frustration, desire, powerlessness, flooded a neurological system that had no levees, no channels, no vocabulary for the deluge. She didn't cry. She detonated. Her body went rigid, then melted into a boneless heap on the linoleum. A scream tore from her throat, so raw it silenced the store's muzak. Shoppers turned, their carts pausing. Looks of pity, annoyance, and silent judgment converged on Celeste, whose own face flushed a matching scarlet, but with shame, not rage. Juliet, get up. Right now. The command was a hissed whisper, laced with threat. The scream intensified. People are staring. Do you want me to take your tablet away? The threat meant nothing. Juliet was no longer in the realm of cause and effect. She was a vessel of pure sensation, lost at sea. Celeste's options flashed in her panicked eyes. Give in, rewarding the behavior. Drag her out, a humiliating spectacle, or wait it out, under the blistering gaze of an audience. She chose a fourth familiar path, disengagement. She straightened, assumed a mask of icy calm, and turned her back, pretending to intently compare prices on vanilla extract. She abandoned her daughter in the eye of the storm, sending a brutal, unintended lesson. Your biggest feelings are so unacceptable, so monstrous, that even I must leave you alone with them. In Juliet's overwhelmed brain, the message was seared in. When you feel too much, you are alone. The neural pathway being carved linked intense emotion with abandonment. The strategy for the future? Avoid the feeling, suppress it, or, one day, explode in a place where no one could walk away. Just 2 aisles over, in cereal, Martin was also approaching the precipice. He wanted the box with the cartoon rocket. Then, his cart already holding the plain oats they came for, knelt down. I see that rocket, buddy. It's cool. But we're getting our power-up oats today. Those are our growing fuel. Martin's chin wobbled. The first tear welled. Want rocket? His voice climbed, a siren charging up. This was the critical fork. Ben didn't look at the other shoppers. He didn't see an audience. He saw his son, drowning in the same neurological tsunami. He didn't kneel near Martin. He knelt with him, right there on the floor, his back against the shelf of Raisin Bran. He didn't touch him yet. An overloaded nervous system can read touch as an attack. Instead, he became an anchor in the storm. His voice was low, a calm, steady rhythm against the shriek. Whoa, Ben said, his own eyes wide with a kind of awe. That is a huge feeling. It's like a volcano in your body, isn't it? It's so big and hot and loud. Martin's scream hitched, just for a millisecond. He was heard. That's okay, Ben murmured. Volcanoes happen. I'm right here. The feeling is big, but I've got you. You're safe. He didn't offer the rocket. He didn't reason. He named the weather. He gave the incomprehensible internal tempest an external shape of volcano. He validated its intensity. Most importantly, he stayed present, proving he was not afraid of the monsoon. Martin's rigid body began to soften. The screams dissolved into shuddering, heartbreaking sobs. He fell forward into his father's chest. Ben held him, rocking slightly. It's so frustrating, he whispered into his hair. You wanted it so much. It's okay to be sad. The storm didn't end instantly, but it transformed. It moved from a state of terror, being hijacked by an emotion, to a state of grief, experiencing an emotion. The neural activity shifted from the primal amygdala, alarm, danger, toward the developing prefrontal cortex, this is sadness. It is bearable. I am not alone. 10 minutes later, Martin, spent and hiccuping, was helping Ben put the power-up oats in the cart, his small hand clinging tightly to Ben's finger. No rocket, but something far more valuable, a roadmap. Dr. Alina Vance, analyzing parent diaries and stress hormone samples, would later codify this as co-regulation versus emotional abandonment. The children co-regulated, whose parents became anchors, not judges, developed what she called emotional muscle memory. Their brains learned the cycle. Big feeling, recognition, support, calming. They were building an internal thermostat. The others, like Juliet, learned to fear their own heat. Their emotional development went underground, often re-emerging later as anxiety, outbursts of misplaced anger, or a profound inability to self-soothe. In aisle 7, 2 fathers passed each other. One pushed a cart, his son humming quietly, a connection forged in fire. The other carried a stiff, silent little girl, a cold void now separating them where a flood had been. Both children had weathered a monsoon. Only one had been taught that after the rain, there is solid ground, and a hand that will never let go. We think we are building safe children. We install gates, soften corners, hold their hands a little too tightly. But there is a secret, counterintuitive truth hiding in plain sight on every playground. The most dangerous thing you can build is a child who has never learned to fall. For Juliet, the world was a museum of beautiful, untouchable things. Her playground visits were exercises in curated containment. "Not too high, sweetie," Celeste would sing, her hand a permanent fixture on Juliet's back as she navigated the toddler slide. "That's too fast. That boy is too rough." The message was woven into every interaction. The world is a series of threats. Your body is fragile. You must be managed. On this bright Saturday, the park's newest feature was a low, winding balance beam, a serpentine log barely 6 inches off the wood-chip ground. For other 4-year-olds, it was a pirate's plank, a tightrope over a canyon. For Juliet, it was a precipice. She stood at the end, her pink sneakers firmly planted on the safe, solid platform. Her eyes tracked the beam's length. She wanted to walk it. The desire was a physical pull in her chest. But louder was the internalized voice, the one that now lived inside her. "Too risky. You might fall. You could get hurt. Stay here. Go on, Juliet. You can do it." Celeste called from the bench, phone in hand, offering the encouragement from a distance she had created. Juliet's foot lifted, hovered, retreated. The neural pathway for courage, the one that must fire to override the amygdala's shriek of danger, was unpracticed, overgrown from disuse. Her body had learned a different lesson. Hesitation is safety. Avoidance is smart. She sat down, choosing the platform, and watched as other children conquered the dragon log without a thought. Her brain logged the event not as a missed opportunity, but as a confirmed hypothesis. I was right. It was dangerous. I am not capable. The scaffold her mother built was not beneath her. It was around her, a beautiful cage that was beginning to feel like her actual size. At the very same moment, on the towering, twisting big kids slide, Martin was facing his own dragon. He stood at the top, knuckles white on the guardrails, looking down the sheer, tubular drop. It had seemed like a brilliant idea from the ground. Up here, it felt like a mistake. His heart was a trapped bird in his ribs. "Dad," he called, his voice thin with terror. Ben stood at the bottom, not on his phone, not talking to other parents. His entire attention was a lighthouse beam fixed on his son. He didn't shout empty encouragement. He didn't say, "It's not scary," a lie that would only teach Martin to distrust his own instincts. He made his body a promise. He planted his feet wide on the soft landing mulch and opened his arms, creating a wide, unmissable target. "I'm right here, Martin," he called, his voice steady and factual. "Your body knows what to do. You can come down sitting or on your tummy. I will not move." This was scaffolding. He wasn't on the platform doing it for him. He wasn't on the ground yelling at him to just do it. He was at the base, providing the secure structure, his unwavering presence, his belief, his readiness to catch not the fall, but the child if he fell. Martin's breath came in short gasps. He looked at the slide. He looked at his father's open arms. The battle was visible on his face, the ancient fear of gravity versus the newer, still fragile trust in a promise. He chose trust. He lowered himself onto his belly, a whimper escaping him, and pushed off. The 3-second descent was a lifetime. Then he shot out the bottom, into the mulch, into his father's waiting grasp. Ben didn't fuss. He didn't say, "See? That was easy." He simply squeezed him tight, absorbing the residual tremble. "You did it," he whispered, a statement of pure awe. "You were scared and you did it anyway. That is so brave." The neurochemical cocktail that flooded Martin's system was transformative. A burst of dopamine, reward, a wash of oxytocin, connection, and a decreased cortisol response, the threat system learning to downregulate. His brain was learning the most vital equation: risk plus supported practice equals competence. The scaffold of safe risk allowed him to build his own internal architecture of courage. Dr. Alina Vance, watching similar scenes through her research, called this the vestibular calculus. Children like Martin, who were allowed to test their limits in the presence of a secure base, developed superior proprioception, their brain's map of their body in space. They were less accident-prone, not more, because they understood the physics of their own movement. They could assess real risk. Children like Juliet, whose risks were preemptively eliminated, developed a kind of learned helplessness draped in caution. Their world remained small because their belief in their own agency never grew to fill a larger space. Their fear wasn't protective, it was limiting, a ceiling they learned to build for themselves. An hour later, Juliet was being buckled into her stroller, a juice box placed in her cup holder, a screen offered to smooth the transition home. Martin, his hair sweaty and full of wood chips, was begging Ben for one more turn on the big slide, his face alight with the hard-won glow of self-conquest. 2 children. 2 approaches to safety. One was being taught that the world was a series of threats to be feared. The other was learning that his own capable body was the greatest safety net he would ever have. The most profound risks, it turns out, are never on the playground equipment. They are in the choices we make as we stand at the bottom, waiting to see if we have built a prisoner in a tower or a pioneer who knows how to build a ladder. We fret over ABCs and 123s, drilling kindness as a rule to be recited. Say sorry. Share. But empathy isn't taught. It's forged in the fire of a stolen shovel, and the treaty that follows writes the neural signature for a lifetime of human connection. The battleground was a humble rectangle of sand, defended by a splintered wooden castle. The combatants, Juliet, meticulously smoothing a turret with the back of a plastic spoon, and a boy named Leo, whose enthusiasm was a force of nature. The weapon, a bright red bucket. Juliet had claimed the bucket. It was hers by proximity, by desire, by the unspoken law of toddler possession. Leo saw a need. His own castle needed a moat, and the red bucket was perfect. He lunged, a blur of impulsive motion, and snatched it from the sand beside her. The reaction was instantaneous. Juliet's world, so carefully ordered, shattered. A wail of pure injustice erupted, not just for the bucket, but for the violation of her fragile control. Her nanny, Evelyn, looked up from her magazine. "Juliet, sweetie, it's fine." Evelyn called from the bench, her tone a practice bomb. "Let him play with it. You have other toys. Be a good girl and share." The command was logical. It was socially graceful. It was neurologically catastrophic. Juliet's tears intensified into heaving sobs. She was not fine. Her feeling of violation was real, acute, and being dismissed. The lesson was layered and toxic. Your sense of fairness is an overreaction. Your pain is an inconvenience to the peace. To be good, you must silence your own hurt. Empathy, in this equation, was a one-way street that began with the erasure of her own feelings. She learned to associate kindness with self-betrayal. Across the sandbox, a different drama unfolded. One not of theft, but of tragedy. Martin had spent 20 minutes on his masterpiece, a dinosaur mountain, complete with a winding pebble path. His friend, Sam, crouched nearby, building a careful wall. When Sam stood up to fetch more twigs, he turned too quickly. His foot came down like a meteor, obliterating the mountain's peak. Sam froze. Martin stared at the ruins. This was the moment. The air crackled with potential, for rage, for blame, for a friendship fracturing. Martin's face flushed, his fists clenched. The angry cry was building in his throat. His father, Ben, who had been watching the slow, beautiful work of construction, didn't speak to Martin.
He spoke for Sam.
He gave words to the invisible. "Oh, wow," Ben said softly, his eyes on Sam's horrified face. "Look at Sam's face, Martin."
He sees what happened. He feels so sorry.
He didn't mean to. This was the pivot. It shifted the focus from Martin's destroyed property to Sam's internal state. It made the other child's mind visible. Martin's angry gaze lifted from his crumbled mountain to Sam's welling eyes. He saw the trembling lip, the stiff posture of guilt. His own anger, mirrored in another's distress, began to morph into something else. Sam's first tear broke free. "I broke it," he whispered. Ben didn't prompt Martin. He simply handed him a tool, not a physical one, but a neural one. He modeled noticing.
He's really sad, huh?
His heart feels bad. Martin's clenched fists uncurled. The neural pathway for vengeance was being bypassed, and a newer, fainter one, the empathy pathway, was receiving a surge of traffic. He took a wobbly step forward. He didn't have the words yet, so he used his body. He picked up a pristine, cone-shaped shell from the sand, his favorite treasure, and held it out to Sam. "Here," Martin mumbled, not looking at him. For your wall." It was a clumsy, profound act of repair. He wasn't just giving a shell. He was offering a piece of his own happiness to alleviate the suffering he now saw in his friend. He was building a bridge between two interior worlds. In that moment, the Sandbox Treaty was signed. Its terms were simple. "I see your feeling. My feeling matters too. We can fix this." The brain chemicals at work were profound. A drop in cortisol, stress, a rise in oxytocin, bonding, and the activation of mirror neurons, the very cells that allow us to feel what others feel. Martin wasn't just learning to be nice. He was building the biological infrastructure for compassion. Dr. Alina Vance's research in moral development pinpointed this exact fork. Children whose caregivers consistently mind-minded for them, verbalizing the unseen emotions of others, developed what she called a theory of a caring mind. They came to believe that other people's interiors were real, complex, and worthy of attention. Children taught to prioritize politeness over genuine emotional recognition, like Juliet, developed a theory of a judging mind. They saw others as arbiters of their behavior, not as feeling beings. Their social world became a performance, not a connection. An hour later, Juliet sat stiffly in her stroller, the stolen bucket incident a sour, unresolved knot in her stomach. Martin and Sam were collaborating on a new, joint fortress, their conflict now part of their shared story, a foundation stronger than sand. Two sandboxes. Two futures of human relationship. One child was learning to navigate the intricate map of the human heart. The other was being given a simple, cold compass pointing only to good and bad, with no directions for the messy terrain in between. The greatest gift we can build in a child is not a flawless castle. It is the knowledge that when it inevitably crumbles, by accident or by injustice, there is a protocol for repair, and it begins not with a rule, but with a single, offered shell. We sterilize, sanitize, and streamline their world, believing a clean, quiet space is a safe space. But we have made a catastrophic error. We have silenced the very orchestra that teaches a brain how to feel truly alive. For a child's mind is not built in the vacuum of a pristine room. It is forged in the glorious, chaotic muck of the world's raw song. For Juliet, the world was a palette of beige and white. Her sensory experiences were curated, filtered, and profoundly quiet. Her hands were scrubbed clean before they could truly get dirty. Her snacks were delivered in crumb-free pouches, bypassing texture. Nature was a picture behind glass. The grass was damp, the dirt germy, the wind messy for your hair. Her developing brain was fed a diet of smooth plastic, synthetic fabrics, and the predictable, looped sounds of digital animation. It was safe, predictable, and starving. On a family picnic in the park, Juliet sat on a checkered blanket, a fortress of cleanliness. A ladybug landed on the edge of a grape container. "Look, Juliet." "A bug," her mother said brightly. Juliet stared, her expression one of detached observation, as if watching a silent movie. The ladybug was a visual fact, not an invitation. She felt no impulse to let it crawl on her finger, to feel its tiny, tickling legs. The connection between sight, touch, and wonder had never been wired. When a gust of wind rustled the oak leaves above into a rushing chorus, she blinked, but didn't look up. The sound was background noise, not a part of a story. Her senses lived in separate, soundproofed rooms. Meanwhile, just down the hill, Martin was conducting the world's symphony with his entire being. He was barefoot, his toes curled into the cool, dew-slick grass. In one hand, he clutched a fistful of rich, black soil from the flower bed, letting it sift through his fingers like gritty, brown sugar. "Heavy," he murmured to himself. Proprioceptive input, mapping his body's strength against the weight of the earth. A fat bumblebee drone-bumbled past his ear. He froze, head tilted, tracking the sound. Angry plane, he decided. Auditory discrimination. separating a new sound from the ambient noise, assigning it meaning. His father, Ben, handed him a freshly picked sprig of rosemary. "Smell this." Martin crushed the needles in his palm and inhaled deeply, his eyes widening at the sharp, piney punch. "Spicy tree," he declared, then stuck out his tongue to taste the green oil on his skin, his face puckering. Olfactory gustatory integration, linking smell, taste, and memory. This wasn't just play. This was the most critical cognitive work of his life. Every textured leaf, every bird call, every shift in temperature and scent was a data point firing into his sensory cortex, building a complex, multi-layered map of reality. His brain was learning to integrate sight with sound, touch with smell, creating a rich, interconnected web of understanding. He wasn't just seeing a tree, he was knowing it through its scratchy bark, its whispering leaves, the tartness of its unripe berry. Dr. Alina Vance, whose lab studied sensory integration, saw this as the great modern divergence. Children like Martin, immersed in sensory-rich chaos, developed robust, adaptable nervous systems. Their brains became masterful at processing multiple streams of input, leading to better focus, emotional regulation, and problem-solving. They felt grounded in their bodies and in the world. Children like Juliet, raised in sensory-poor order, were at risk for a different outcome. Their understimulated sensory systems could become either hypersensitive, overwhelmed by the buzz of a fluorescent light, the tag on a shirt, or hyposensitive, craving violent spinning, loud noises, seeking sensation they'd been denied. Their world was either an assault or a void, with no comfortable middle ground nurtured by the gentle, graduated challenges of nature. The most telling moment came when a summer shower began, a sudden pattering of warm rain. Juliet was swept into her mother's arms and under the shelter of a giant umbrella in seconds, wrapped in a towel, her experience of the rain reduced to a visual phenomenon behind a vinyl shield. Martin threw his head back and opened his mouth, laughing as the drops hit his tongue and eyelids. He stomped in a forming puddle, watching the splatter pattern, feeling the cold splash on his calves. He was inside the weather, not observing it. His brain was logging the feel of temperature change, the sound of rain on leaves versus pavement, the smell of petrichor rising from the earth, the full symphony. That evening, Juliet would be bathed, scrubbed free of the outdoor day, and read a digital book about weather. Martin would fall asleep with the faint, earthy scent of soil still under his fingernails, his dreams likely echoing with the rush of wind and rain. One child's reality was a sanitized documentary. The other's was a full-sensory, participatory epic. We think we are protecting them by building a quieter, cleaner world. But in doing so, we are turning down the volume on the very symphony that teaches them how to feel, how to connect, and ultimately, how to be human. The mess is not the enemy. It is the melody. We race through the toddler years obsessed with milestones, fearing missteps, scanning for signs of genius or delay. But we are asking the wrong questions. The legacy of these early years is not measured in the words they can spell or the shapes they can sort. It is measured in the silent echo of your presence that will one day become their inner voice. The story does not end in childhood. It loops back, a timeless river flowing into the future. A decade later, Dr. Alina Vance stood at the window of her lab, not looking at brain scans, but at a simple home video sent by a former research participant. It was Ben, now with streaks of gray in his hair, kneeling in his own backyard garden. Beside him, his son Martin, now 12, was carefully planting sunflower seeds. Martin's movements were sure, his hands comfortable with the dirt. He was explaining to his younger sister why they needed to leave space between the seeds, his voice patient, almost fatherly. "See, if they're too close, they'll fight for the sun," he said, his cadence an unconscious echo of Ben's own long-ago explanations of juice rivers and oatmeal boats. He wasn't just planting seeds. He was embodying a legacy of curiosity, patience, and a fundamental belief that effort in the messy, real world yielded growth. The camera panned, and for a moment, Alina saw it. The look on Ben's face as he watched his son teach. It wasn't pride, exactly. It was recognition. It was the quiet awe of a man seeing the deepest part of himself, not his genes, but his method of being, faithfully reproduced in the next generation. The scaffold he had built for Martin had now become part of Martin's own internal architecture, strong enough to hold up another. The loop was complete. The same day, Alina reviewed a late-entry survey for her longitudinal study. It was from Celeste, Juliet's mother. The questions were standard: academic progress, social activities, notable challenges. Celeste's answers were polished, highlighting Juliet's excellence in a competitive gymnastics program and her top marks. But in the margin, written in a hurried script, was an unsolicited note. Sometimes I feel like I don't know her. She gets so quiet, so frustrated with herself if she's not perfect. The other day, she fell during a routine, just a small slip. She didn't cry. She just went to the bathroom and, according to her coach, silently hit her own leg repeatedly until it bruised.
She's only 12. Why would she do that?
She has everything. Alina set down the tablet, a familiar, scientific sorrow in her chest. Juliet wasn't hitting her leg. She was hitting the child she once was, the one whose spills were messy, whose risks were too much, whose big feelings were met with a turned back. The voice that should have been an inner anchor had become an inner critic. The pristine, prefabricated world had created a prison of high expectations, where a mistake was not a chance to learn, but a shameful flaw to be self-punished. The legacy of efficient correction had become a legacy of silent, perfect suffering. This was the final haunting data point. To catch them young was not to determine a child's destiny, but to install their operating system for life. Martin's system ran on a core belief: the world is fascinating. My feelings are manageable. I am capable, and I am not alone. Juliet's system ran on a different code: the world is a test. My feelings are weaknesses. I must be perfect to be worthy of connection. The work is never done, but the path loops back on itself. We are not just raising children. We are raising future parents, teachers, friends, and leaders. The patience model during a tantrum becomes their patience with a struggling colleague. The curiosity nurtured in a puddle becomes their innovation in a lab. The empathy forged over a broken sandcastle becomes their compassion in a boardroom. Alina looked back at the video of Martin in the garden. The sun was setting, painting them both in gold. Ben put a hand on his son's shoulder, a simple, wordless transmission of love and solidarity. Martin leaned into the touch, still talking to his sister, never breaking his flow. In that moment, Alina understood the true meaning of her life's work. The neuroscience, the data, the studies, they all pointed to this single, human truth. The most powerful thing we build in the toddler years is not a smarter child. It is the echo of our own calm, curious, loving presence that will whisper to them long after we are gone, guiding them to build a worthy world of their own. The river of time flows forward, but its source is always here, in the now, in the small choices that feel so inconsequential. We are all standing at the source, holding the future in our hands, one synaptic firework, one named feeling, one muddy handful of earth at a time. The loop continues. What will your echo sound like? This is the end of our story, but the beginning of yours. The science is clear, and the path is open. Ready to build a legacy of resilience, curiosity, and connection? We translate the research into your daily life. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to our channel for your family's next chapter.